Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Looking Deeper with Denise Iwana Francisco and the Reverend Sandra Herrick. Hello, Reverend Sandra Herrick.
Hello, Dana. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are things up there in New Hampshire way?
Well, we have just received the most beautiful full moon rise on this lovely day of the equinox, and I was just conducting my women's group. That is a very solid core of women that we do our emotional work and contain the space of truth and discovery. And at one point it was like I looked over the shoulder of one of the ladies and there was the moon just cresting over that beautiful mountain ridge. And I mean, we just watched it until it lit the sky and suspended like a balloon released. And welcome spring, hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. That's how I am. And now I'm ready to rock and roll with you.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Yeah, we were doing really well with the sunshine and hello to springtime. And then around 4 o'clock, it decided that, we needed one more last hurrah of snow. So it's snowing right now here
goodness.
for us. So we're receiving a beautiful blanket of, the moon in flake form is how I'm trying to take a look at it, looking on the positive side of things. So.
Okay. So what's new? And let's, it's, first of all, this is only our second time, I think, coming back after a bit of taking a step back and kind of re-navigating and everything else. And I have to say that the joy I feel in getting ready and then really sitting down, the joy of us and the way that we collaborate and the way that the energy gathers around us is a tingling sensation that I'm just thrilled to be in. So thank you, Dana.
Well, I'm really tickled to be back in the saddle with the show as well. And, the beginning of our 11th year of doing radio shows together. And it's always something new. It's always something different on the horizon. We take a look at it. We grab it. We go with it. And typically you and I talk about what it is that's going on in our own lives because it always seems to be very relevant to what's going on in the lives of others. And
right.
This evening, I love your line, recovering from the insanity of being alive. Where does healing begin? Sometimes this life can feel insane.
Yeah. It really does. Sometimes being alive is a negotiation of reality. I mean, really, maybe always life is a negotiation of reality. Whose reality? I'm very aware that if you have 4 or 5 people in a room, everybody's reality is different, and we're all sharing the same space. And so, when we were talking last night and kind of recapturing all the emotions of what's going on and what's happening in the world, there is an insanity to being alive, and you have to really work hard to find your balance, to calibrate your point of view, and to even represent a point of view that has I think the best way I want to say it is a credibility to allow you to thrive, to grow, to explore, to be, and challenge honesty with other people's realities. So yeah, it's life is a little crazy.
Life is a little crazy. Our wonderful friend Lady Hawk Catherine Harrison from down there in the great state of Texas is tuned in and says hello and commenting that reality can be insane. For her it feels insane at this time. And it's amazing how sometimes we're brought to the point of insanity to find our sanity and our
Absolutely.
way to healing. When we were talking about, what are we going to discuss? Where are we going to go? Because sometimes we go places where others usually fear to tread. We decided to talk about healing and where it begins. And right. It's not always pretty, is it, Sand?
No, and I think it's important to qualify this with, first and foremost, in the work that I do, in the devotion that I have within my ministry, within my practice, within my spiritual, psychic, whatever anybody wants to label it, including myself. the bottom line of my work is to discover the emotion in your soul, to unravel the story, your human experience, to be able to look at what has happened to you or what do you go through in order to become you, and even to find that space where you were kind of stolen from yourself, where someone else implied that you weren't supposed to exist the way that you were. And so we shifted, we altered our identities, or we accommodated, or we had to help keep secrets, or we didn't know how to express. And for me, the word healing is, sure, we can have a broken leg, sure, we can have a broken arm, sure, we can have an illness. But for me, that healing is, how do we heal the experience of living our lives that for everyone brings episodes of trauma, loss, tragedy, confusion, addiction, isolation. You know, life isn't always just a big old bunch of daisies. It's the weeds, it's the dirt, it's the drought, it's the snow. And we have to make it safe for how to begin to heal, that you're safe to talk about your life. You're safe to talk about or even discover and honor you have a wound. How many times have you been told, oh, stop it, grow up?
Right.
Cry baby.
Exactly, or I'll give you something to cry about if you don't stop crying.
Exactly.
I'll really give you something to cry about. I can't even count the number of times that I heard that. And it is true. I love that phrase that you use about finding a place of safety in which to heal.
Yes.
Because if we don't feel safe, even within ourselves, we can be reticent to heal or to start the healing process. And sometimes we have to get to a place where not even a safety net is there, but the insanity of the moment or the insanity of the situation brings us to a point where all we have left is heal or die in order to heal.
Well, you know, that's a profound thing that you've just said, because the suicide rate is up for all sorts of ages. The opioid crisis is something that is I would say, a suicide of the soul. And because you have to stay in an altered state in order to even adjust to a state of existence. And it's a slippery slide because it does take lives. That there's that place of, how do you stand? How do we find what we stand for and feel either the right or bravery to say what we stand for and have a discussion about it rather than an argument about it? Because I know in my family I grew up, and if I said something, it turned into you'd have to defend yourself. Or being in a relationship, you know, I have an idea and then you have to defend it. And one of the things I even say to my own husband is like, I want to have a dialogue that goes back and forth, not a jagged conversation of trying to explain what I'm explaining and then defending that I even wanted to explain something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how did you get to that point, Sandy, where you decided that, you know, in order for a conversation to be had or for your voice to be heard, you know, sometimes it comes down to damn the torpedoes, this is where I'm at. And by golly, I've been through the depths of hell and back again. I'm not going back there because now I know who I am because I was forged in that fire.
Right.
And sometimes it's the safety of knowing who we are that gives us the place to begin the healing.
Well, it's interesting because there's that, you know, when somebody says, how do you know who you are? It's a discovery that has accumulated, because I can remember as a child, I didn't know who I was. I was just safe being what I was being. I had attitude. I fought for the underdog. I said what was on my mind, and eventually that kind of got rearranged because of certain things. But I can't say I knew who I was. I was being who I was, and then people told me about it. Wow, you're brave, or wow, you're good in a fight, or wow, you stand up for yourself, and it kind of gives, I can feel the kid in me go, really? I was just gonna go beat his ass. I was like, he hurt my sister.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's the simple truth of it. And so knowing who we are is a discovery of going through our toy chest, going through our treasure chest, being given opportunities to be confronted and confront the dynamic of our persona, our personality, our environment, our family of origin. Are we allowed to speak our minds? Are we respected if we speak our minds? Going to school, the first time I knew I was allowed to really speak my mind was when I was in art school in 1966, and Vietnam was on, and the pompous artist was, in his corduroy pants, his very chic pipe, and his beard, and his glasses, and his saggy socks, and his brown tie shoes, saying what it was about people going to Vietnam that was wrong, and this, that, and the other thing. And my boyfriend was over there. And it was amazing that I stood up and said my piece, not as a person defending the war or having an opinion about something. I was talking about the integrity of an innocent man going over to defend our land because he's honorable and he wants to do something that is honorable. And and you know me enough to know that when I have attitude, I do have it.
Just a little.
So it was, to be able to talk to an authority with such a passion in my heart for the innocence, not the politicalness of it, the innocence of honor. For a man to stand and take honor, to go and fight. And when the discussion was over, because he didn't have much to say after that, and I walked out of the room, so it did end the discussion. Mm-hmm. The people in the room came out and said, thank you for saying it. Thank you for saying it. And it's not, again, that I knew who I was. I was discovering that by somebody saying something, I was feeling something that I needed to represent for myself and be the spokesperson for someone else. It wasn't an opinion I had 3.5 seconds before he talked. All of a sudden, I was inspired to say something that I felt inside myself that I wasn't even really clear about. And so finding out who I am is a wonderful opportunity to put, I think for everybody, ourselves in situations that challenge us to discover our personal growth. Because knowing who I am, I don't want to just sit in that. I want to explore it and expand on it.
And that can make others around you uncomfortable, huh, Sand?
Yeah.
We often know that we're coming out of insanity when those that have inspired the insanity within us begin to have their cages rattled.
Right.
And we have to be strong enough, or I don't want to say desperate enough, passionate enough about
or
being fully, or wounded enough.
Wounded enough.
Absolutely, to say, here I am, to hell with it. We're going with it, and I'm going to be who I came here to be, and I'm going to say what I feel. Last night you and I were talking about, in our conversation, that how we as adults, my cousin Johnny is in the chat room, and she's saying, as the youngest, there was no such thing for her as speaking her mind.
Right.
And it reminded me of our conversation last night about healing and recovering from the insanity. And a lot of times the insanity in our lives begins in our childhood.
Absolutely.
And we hear something at the age of 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8, and unless we really review it, we can look at, I'll speak for myself, looking at myself at 56 years old and coming to terms with the fact that some of the things that I heard or came to understand as a 6-year-old, I was still thinking of them with my 6-year-old mind and emotional state, even at the age of 56. And that in and of itself is a revelation that we no longer have to continue to think like the child that received the information.
Exactly. One of the greatest things one of my clients said to me the other day was that when you say that to me, I feel like I'm 5 years old. And it's that place of, well, let's talk to the 5-year-old. What happened to the 5-year-old? And it's beautiful to know, and you've seen this enough in the work that I do, that when somebody says something, how old were you when you feel, come inside your body. Mm-hmm. Where do you feel this in your body? How old do you feel? Mm-hmm. That this information, my shivers, I've got goosebumps on my goosebumps. Lady Hawk. And there's that place of knowing that we're loaded with information. Our history is so well documented inside of us, even though intellectually or emotionally we've had to kind of put it in storage or closet it or keep the secret and say, I don't want to remember this, or we're overwhelmed by something and we have post-traumatic stress or a shock. And our brain is sophisticated enough to keep us in a place of, we'll heal this later when we can deal with it.
Yes.
We'll talk about it later when we have something we can say about it. We have to gather information. For any wound, if I go to the hospital with an obvious wound, they'll examine, they'll clean, they'll contain, they'll start saying, support her, get me on, a drug, or soothe me, or calm me, or, they analyze so many different quadrants of the situation as they're looking at, there's the wound, we're getting to it from so many different directions. Mm-hmm. And all of those directions are to support the patient to know, number one, you're safe. Number two, we're listening to you. We're seeing you. We're looking at you. And your wound is not offending us. We're not recoiling. We're actually digging in. We're available to be here. And I think that in healing, that is one of the greatest resources of comfort, to know that if someone starts to tell their story or say, this is my wound, that a therapist or a counselor or a friend doesn't go, ooh.
Right.
Or I can't deal with this, or I can't, and it's not bad or wrong if anybody says they can't. It's to honor, I'm unavailable, I'm not ready. Mm-hmm. And to know that you're not being rejected, you're just being honest with, this is not the place to bring my wound. And find the place to bring the wound. So that when we say, ow, somebody goes, where? Mm-hmm. How? Describe it. Mm-hmm. And I think the power of healing is also, like any real good operation, it takes time for the wound to develop. It takes time for the wound to mature. It takes time for the wound to be loud enough for somebody to say, I think I need this looked at. And then it takes time for whatever's going to happen, and then recover.
Beautifully
Not everybody knows. Thank you. Not everybody knows how to recover. What do you know about that?
Well, I think particularly here in the West, we're taught just to stuff it.
Right.
And having grown up in a military family, you definitely were taught to stuff it. Don't talk about it. Don't acknowledge it. Just keep going forward. The rubber needs to continue to meet the road. So we're not going to discuss this, and you're going to be a good soldier, and you're going to soldier on.
Right.
And for a long time, you and I used to well, not really joke about the fact that crying was not allowed.
Right.
In our household. In fact, you would be punished for crying, or I would be punished for crying. And so you learn not to. Right. And for every emotion that we stuff, or every tear that we don't cry, there's something attached to that.
Right.
There's a memory, there's a trauma, there's something that's gone unhealed, and it continues to build. And oftentimes it brings us to those moments of crisis, the dark night of the soul, aha moments, moments of absolute rage and anger. Sometimes we have to get so mad and so angry that fire, that passion of anger and I've had enough is what fuels us forward,
right?
Propels us into our healing.
Right.
And I think that happens for a lot of people. It's not something usually where we're getting a mani-pedi and we decide, hey, you know what, I think that tomorrow I'm just really going to start dealing with some things. Right. Because I look really good right now. I just had my Botox injection and I'm ready to face the world. That's not usually how it goes.
No. And wounds are so intimate. I think that's a very important thing to acknowledge.
Mm-hmm.
That it's very valuable to stop saying, well, everybody's like this, or this is the way it is, or, well, everybody else is, and, well, it's only normal, and, well, you know, I can get by, or I'm used to it, or we don't talk about it. I mean, there's so many adaptable scenarios that keep us from touching the wound or acknowledging the wound is there, and then addiction starts, or obsession, or eating disorders, or the disease attacks us and we create a stress. And the ability to be able to say I hurt without feeling shame.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to say I'm sad without having to make someone else comfortable before you can honor or talk about your sadness.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know as a child, if I had feelings, I ended up kind of like taking care of everybody else's feelings before I got to my own.
Right.
And I developed the skill of being the caregiver.
Mm-hmm.
It's something I liked. It wasn't a hardship. I'm one of 7 kids. So, you know, this is where I rallied. This is where my badge was acquired. This is where my sword was given to me, that I could step in and do something. But I didn't realize the wound I was developing by being the caregiver. Because normally the caregiver doesn't have the space to say ow, because the people you've taken care of go, you can't do that. You can't fall on us now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm belching on that one.
Mm-hmm.
For everybody that doesn't know, when I belch, we're really talking. I haven't had dinner yet.
Yeah, for all of my cousins that are in the chat room now that have never experienced Sandy firsthand, you know, when spirit's moving, so is her digestive tract. So if you're wondering what on earth was that right there, just some release of healing and spirit. Yeah, energies.
Yeah, really energy.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a beautiful thing here when we say the insanity of life. Life is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
When you think about America, or you think about your neighborhood, I've traveled across America several times, and I've gone north and I've gone south, and I've gone to Europe. And what happens in Europe is you drive for an hour or so, and you're in another country.
Mm-hmm.
When you drive in America, you drive an hour or so, and you're still in the same state, unless you live in the corners like I do. But we have vast spaces of culture in our country that do not relate to the other cultures in the country.
Yes.
And we all have this sense of, well, we belong together, we are together. And especially now, we're really in that incredible opportunity to hear truths that haven't not necessarily been spoken about.
Right.
So it's good to hear it.
It's wonderful.
Good to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
It's good to hear where the wounds are. It's good to hear it's my turn to talk.
Mm-hmm.
It's good to hear this is what I have to say, because it brings to the table what's been hidden, or what thought you shouldn't talk about, or what you thought didn't even exist anymore.
Exactly. And
it wakes us up.
It does. And I love the fact that in the healing, we heal ancestrally.
Yes.
For me, you and I have had deep conversations before I went down to Georgia a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
About not only the healing for myself, the soul healing, but what it would mean to my children, because when you are an adopted person, so too then are your children.
Right.
To a degree. Right? There are missing generations after the direct parent.
Right.
And I think one of the most beautiful moments after I first got to Georgia was I called my son Dane, or he called me actually, and he said, "How's it going, Ma?" And I said, "Oh, it's wonderful, honey." And I was sharing with him some of the stories, and he said, "Well, all I can say, Mom, is, oh my God, you all look alike."
Yeah. Yeah.
And so for my kids, even to see their mom with a group of people that look like her,
right,
was astounding.
Right.
And he and I were talking for a little bit, because he's a history buff like I am. Uh-huh. And my son has always had, as you know, a military proclivity.
Yes.
And collections of military memorabilia since he was about 5 years old, actually. And an absolute enthrallment with the Civil War.
Right.
And so he and I were having a conversation together while I was down there in a moment, and he said to me, "You know, Mom, I'm so happy that you're home in Georgia." And I said, "Why is that, honey?" And he said, "Because you know me." I said, "I do know you." He said, "You've always known that my soul is from the South.
Yeah.
And now, Mom, I can claim it."
Right.
Because you're there. And now you have the stories.
Right.
And I could feel how momentous that was for him at 29 years old.
Right.
And when you said to me, "So Dana, what was it like to actually touch somebody who has your skin?"
Yes.
What was it like to touch somebody who has your skin? And I had to think about that for a moment, and it was profound, and I don't think that I've actually sat and been with that fully yet. Because it's 56 years of never in a million years dreaming it would happen. Right? So when we heal any portion of ourselves in the conversations that are being had nowadays, especially with ancestry testing, they're deep and they're cross-cultural. I mean, there's a cultural difference between the North and the South. There's a cultural difference between and for my relatives that live on an Indian reservation,
right,
and those that are off reservation. You know, you and I kid around about me, you know, feeling some sort of being enamored with New England, but not really understanding why. Why?
Lily, are you out there?
Yeah, Lily, where are you? And, you know, as my cousin Johnny is reminding me, next is a trip to Florida to meet Johnny and my cousin Corey, who are my mother's first cousins.
Wow.
And there's a lot of healing in that, in touching that and being with it and looking at it and hearing the stories.
Yes.
That I believe is ageless.
Yes. Yes. And brings the sanity.
Yes.
For the healing.
Yes.
To the place that's been warped or a little insane with who am I? Where do I come from? Mm-hmm. Is there anybody in the world that looks like me? And why was I removed? or displaced
Mm-hmm.
or not accepted.
Yeah.
I mean, rejection and abandonment are two of the greatest hurdles of pain that any of us can feel. I know how I felt when, if I leave somebody, I can get over that easy. But if somebody leaves me, oh, wow!
Yeah.
Why? Oh, why?
Exactly. And add to the fact that you're a Scorpio, right?
I know, there's always just a tad of drama.
Uh-huh.
But it is something. It's like when I'm done, it's like, oh, poof, I'm out of here. But if they leave me, it's like, and I wasn't expecting it, oh my God. Or even if I did, then I would cleave to, but no, get help. What can we do to be better or make it stay? Don't change.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that place of, I come from a place that my mother's always told me, Sandy, you were wanted. I was born after World War II. I'm the child of like, we're going to make it. We're safe. Let's have kids. So I was planned on. The only one out of 7 kids. And so I have that foundation. And I still am traumatized in certain abandonments or rejections or that lack of being included. So that, on top of the original abandonment of being adopted or sent off to be adopted, which even is more accurate,
mm-hmm.
How does one touch that wound and survive rejection or the fear of inclusion or the fear of not knowing your seed?
Mm-hmm. My cousin Bobby is commenting on your statement about touching the skin and feeling that. And, for most children, for our babies when they're born, even when puppies pop out or, little animals pop out, the first thing we want to do is catch them up and hold them and touch them and keep on doing that. And that contact is so important. And, for myself and whatever the circumstances happened to be back in 1962, it is what it was, and it is now what it is. And I have to think to myself, and maybe my cousins can weigh in on this. I mean, the blessing of, being discovered by them is almost fairy tale-like in some regards. But my hope in going there to Georgia was not only to be able to look at faces that looked the same, but habits and mannerisms and senses of humor and all of those things. And my biggest hope as well was I hope that they gain something from me going there. I don't want to go there because it's just about me. I hope that I'm able to contribute something, some healing, some joy, some piece of a puzzle, maybe that their soul knew was missing. Maybe consciously they didn't, but somewhere along the line, maybe they knew. I believe that all of our daddies knew, and they've all been collaborating on the other side, right? And those of us with moms who have passed as well, that maybe there is healing in that as well. And for all of the ancestors that we carry within us.
Mm-hmm. There's such a generosity. And I want to go back to the skin, because the skin is that receptor of sensation of kindness or pain,
mm-hmm.
comfort, warmth, cold.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing a baby experiences is being caught. Its skin is surrounded by this incredible miracle called the mother's, womb. And to be brought out and to be touched, to be stimulated, to be wrapped, washed, to be comforted, and then to be placed in the mother's arms. And we now know enough about imprinting to know that it's a pheromonal thing. It is a activity in the brain that seeks the bond. And that there are way too many individuals now that are traumatized by the lack of bonding. They do not have the capacity to bond. And that it is it's something that happens with the brain, it's something that happens with the emotion, and that when we do bond, that bond is eternal. Even if it gets stretched across the universe or gets stretched throughout other lifetimes. Mm-hmm. That bond is the imprint. We do it with our animals. You can mark it when the eyes register.
Yes.
You can mark it when the skin touches and you have a sensation. Where I can touch somebody's skin and go, ooh, or touch somebody's skin and go, ooh. Mm-hmm. And where the warmth is, the beauty of saying you're good enough to touch, you're clean enough to touch, you're warm enough, you're no matter what you are, you're touchable. You're touchable. And I find that in my practice when people talk that's not what they're really saying. They wonder if they're good enough to have a relationship or if they're, qualified to have one. Are we we have to somehow be allowed to be touchable. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Without touch, we starve.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the original touch from our mother is really the beginning of the healing from the process of birth.
Absolutely.
And so when we're brought here to the earth plane, when we choose to come here and we're brought here, the very first way that we're healed from the trauma of birth, of gestation, is the healing touch of our parents.
Exactly.
That's where it begins. And all along the way after that moment, there are things in this human life that we experience. And we forget sometimes that we're having a human life, and it's not going to be perfect. And it's going to be painful. It's going to be passionate. It's going to be joyful. It's going to be so many things. And becoming mindful or consciously aware of where it hurts or where something is unresolved.
Well, growing up is a bitch.
Yes, it is.
Because it means you have to stop being a child. You have to be accountable. You have to look at what is real. You have to have some kind of ownership. And that the trials and tribulations of growing up are not easy for anyone.
No.
And it is painful to grow up. Even though there's honor of achievement, it's painful to lose your first animal. It's painful to lose a grandparent. It's painful to lose a friend or not be accepted. I mean, wounds, I think it's also important to establish what a wound is, because not everybody is wounded in the same way.
Right. How do you define a wound, Sandy, for yourself?
My wounds are on a scale of emotional, intellectual, in my status of self-awareness or my self-esteem. My wounds are my body, what my body looks like or acts like, or how it's been touched or it hasn't been touched. And I mean through the touch of love or the touch of abuse or the touch of assumption, mm-hmm. or the way I didn't know how to protect it from being touched. Mm-hmm. Or didn't know how to even touch back. Touching is an awkward gesture in a lot of ways until we feel the safety of being allowed to touch, invited to touch. And so I come from an agape family, and my husband doesn't. I come from a family, we touched, we hugged, we kissed, 7 kids, everybody was being, wrapped up, thrown around, tossed in the air, giggled. Everybody got bathed. I mean, I had 5 kids by the time I was 18. I was done having babies. So, you know, it was like, I didn't see any need to do another diaper.
Right. Right.
And how many times do you play, here comes the chain, open up the mouth, okay. You know, so there's the beauty of touching in my family where everybody got mudgy. Everybody got cozy. Everybody piled in. We snuggled. And we were safe in that as kids. That was good. And then there was the stuff of, you know, you're beating me up, leave me alone. Oh my God, there's, you know, sibling rivalry. That was pretty powerful in our family too. But my mother and father were affectionate. And I'm surprised as I grew up and continued my affection out into the world that people were like, what are you doing? Oh, you don't hug? I mean, my husband has point blank said, my family didn't hug. They don't touch.
Yeah.
So for me to be emotionally extensive with, I'm not just having an emotion in front of you, I'm offering an emotion to you through my touch. That what I think is, he kind of has to go, whoa, wait a minute, what are you doing? And has had to learn the safety of my touching him. That I wasn't grabbing, I wasn't needy, I wasn't going to hurt him, I wasn't going to seduce him. It was a touch of comfort and a touch of kindness, a touch of love. And I am amazed at how many people are starved for the touch of love.
Yes.
In all sorts of relationships. That we don't know what that touch of love is. So I even think within, it brings the emotion up for me, for your skin to be touched with love by your skin that invites you to be touched, that allows you to touch them. It doesn't dismiss your adopted parents.
No.
Because they touched you also.
Right.
But it's the hormones, it's the oil, it's the genetic, it's the DNA, it's the familiar, to know that you have tribe.
Yes.
And the tribe invites you into the embrace.
Yes.
And you have been invited into the embrace.
I have.
I'm so happy for you. And I want to say thank you to everybody that's listening and to your family, because, you know, to walk this walk with you over the past 10, 11 years that we've known each other, and to be a part of your family in the way that we've established our relationship with your children, your husband, and, you know, I'm kind of like the extended crazy godmother. And so it's, you know, and I'm going to own that. It's like, but there's that beauty of knowing, to see you find that the people you find are real people that are able to look at you and embrace you. Hallelujah.
It's a beautiful thing. My cousin Bobby's just weighing in that she feels as though our connection was a catalyst to reconnect the King family that hadn't been together in quite some time. And, you know, now we have a permanent text message group of cousins that, you know, we can just say, hey, how are you today? Or joke around about something, or a spontaneous, I love you all.
Right.
And for me, that's huge. And last night you said to me, your voice is different. You're different.
Yes.
I am different. And I'm different because of the healing, and I'm different because of everything that led up to all of the decades of preparation for what I would discover and what would discover me.
Yeah. And what would mirror you. One of the greatest moments I ever had in my life in seeing this type of phenomena was I left home at an early age, and I started traveling and getting out there and whatnot. And my nephew, Rusty, he and his mother and father divorced when they were young, and his father had such a distinct personality, body language, voice, attitude. I mean, he was so self-descriptive. It was like you could see him move across the field and you knew it was Butch. And I came back after a few years, and now here's my nephew grown up. He hadn't been around his father in a long time. They didn't, blah, blah, blah. But his mannerism, his voice, his attitude, he was the stamp of his father. And it gave me that pause of, that's where the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, did anyone have your voice? Did anyone have your mannerisms? Did you see yourself? I mean, and I saw, y'all do look alike. there's like, oh my gosh, she's got her eyes. Oh my God, there's the nose. Oh my God, look at the chin over there. And it's like, oh my God, it was just a thrill. But I'm wondering, how did you hear the sounds of your own diction?
As Todd was just reminding me, all of us king girls snort when we laugh. That's number one. Because I have been chided and ridiculed my whole life for having that snort, and all of a sudden I found myself in a group of snorters, for one thing. But, one of the deepest things for me, because this was a very foreign concept for my adoptive family, is the concept of being connected to spirit through intuition, through knowing, through whatever that is. And on both sides, with Johnny and Corey and all of my king cousins, it's a constant. That in and of itself is a constant. Right. And I think probably the biggest, again, with Dane, all of my cousins were kind enough to bring photographs that I could photograph, because our phones these days do such a wonderful job of reproducing photographs. And so they were kind enough to bring lots of family photos that I could take photos of. And there were a couple in particular that I sent off to Dane. And at one point he called me and he said, Ma, I just showed that photo of your father to Colton, and Colton. And Colton said, holy shit, dude. This whole time we thought that you looked just like your dad. You look like your grandpa.
Exactly.
And Dane said to me, my God, Mom, I look like your father.
Yes.
And I said, yes, son, you do. There are components of your dad, of course, but
yes.
You look like your granddaddy.
Yeah.
And again, that sense of healing and that sense of belonging.
Yes.
Was very, very deep. And there's so much healing just in a sense of belonging.
Yes.
And for somebody who, I said to Dane when he was living here in between, getting his new house prepared, I said to him, thanks for having the patience in listening to all of my going on about all of this. And he said, Mom, I'm really happy for you. Because you've waited a long time to know what a lot of us have always known growing up. And for you, you didn't have that.
Right.
But there's something even deeper to it all, and it's the soul component, Sandy. Our soul knows so much, and our soul has so much wisdom. And everything that I discovered in Georgia, and I know that I will discover in Florida, is something that my soul has always known. The diversity of cultures. And I remember in the dream of my dad, the Sarge, and my daddy coming together in that moment. And in the dream, my daddy saying, prepare yourself, you're going to meet the women of your family. And in your family, focus on the women. And he was right. And it came to fruition, and all of our souls knew that. I knew it. The Sarge knew it. My daddy knew it. And in that moment, in preparation for the healing, the unseen and the seen worlds came together. And I think that sometimes in our humanness, we miss the fact that in our healing, the unseen world also steps in to clear the way. How do you feel about that?
As you were talking, the movie Lion came into my consciousness. Has anybody seen the movie Lion? It is about a young boy in India who gets stranded on a train. and gets taken so far from his homeland and ends up going through all these escapades that are horrific and challenging. And he gets adopted and brought to Australia and is brought up by loving people who literally chose to adopt children rather than to have them, because there were so many children in need of being cared for. And I want you to see this movie, because exactly what you are saying, as he started to get older and older and more independent, his psyche started to dream. His unconscious, his subconscious, his soul started to have the curiosity of, where am I from, what, where. And he met some India friends, and they made a jelly kind of dessert, and he walked into the kitchen and saw that jelly dessert, and he literally had like a psychotic break, because his soul knew he had a life before a life. And he was almost driven mad in looking for his family. Mm-hmm. The movie is astounding. And the movie is about the journey of someone's heart and soul saying, I belong to people, they belong to me. Thank you for giving me life, but I need to touch what I belong to also. Mm-hmm. So I don't feel insane with this, I don't belong.
Right.
And that I'm also not criticized for, yes, I'm grateful, but I'm not grateful, because you've got to let me go and find my truth.
Right. Right. Well, you can imagine how my teeth almost fell out. Good thing that I have my own teeth and they're firmly rooted in my own mouth. When my cousin Donna, who was a flight attendant for American Airlines, told me that for years she's been flying into Grand Rapids Gerald R. Ford Airport.
Good Lord.
Isn't that marvelous?
That's, how many times have you walked by each other and didn't even know it?
Exactly. I'm certain of it. And, when we speak about, finding our tribe or finding our group, sometimes what we're searching for in the healing is our soul group, our spiritual group. That isn't necessarily biologically related, but they're the people that understand the soul's path.
Exactly.
And so we can have family in our spiritual friends, and that becomes a spiritual family as well. And people will go an entire lifetime with their biological relatives, but never tapping into their spiritual family or tribe.
Well, it's interesting, because back to the healing, there is so much healing that my spiritual family gives me that my family of origin was not capable of.
Right.
Because so many of the wounds came from there. And it wasn't their job, in all due respect, even though I may want it to be, or to make peace or have it all go nice. It's just in some ways it's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. And to make peace with that,
right.
To know that the wound is not always going to be attended out of our want. You have to attend to my wound. I think this is a very important thing to really talk about, that sometimes we have an agenda with, well, I'm hurt, you hurt me, you have to heal me. Or I'm hurt and I want you to be my healer. Wounds don't always act like that. That's the ego, or that's even the possessiveness of, I want you to bond with me through my pain. Wounds don't heal when somebody wants to bond through that pain.
Yes.
And we bond by understanding through compassion pain. Mm-hmm. We can associate.
And there's a big difference.
It's a very big difference.
I mean, there are people that build ashrams and temples to their pain. I call it, they build camp woe is me, right? And they invite everyone to their camp woe is me. And anyone that just won't participate in the activities of camp woe is me after one or two trips there is rendered the enemy. And why won't you be part of my wounding? And why won't you justify the perpetuation of my wounding? And so sometimes we can be in a situation where we're invited into somebody else's wound because they're unwilling, or they don't know how, perhaps, to begin the process of healing, or perhaps there's no intention of healing because, quite frankly, Camp Woe Is Me is quite comfortable, and there are enough people who will come and pay homage to their pain there while they're roasting weenies and s'mores.
Right.
Right?
Right. Right. And the beauty of what you're saying is the intelligence of the wound, or the intelligence of spirit, even saying that if you're really going to heal, you can't manipulate the healing.
Ooh.
Because healing has its own intelligence.
Yes, it does.
And we can aspire to work with it. We can ask for healing, we can ask for prayers, we can put Reiki or use modalities or use medicine and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But still, how we are healed is not always necessarily the way we thought we would be healed.
Yes.
And I think that's part of the magic of life.
Mm-hmm.
And if 23andMe were not around, you would never have had this opportunity. And you think about how many doors you banged on, thinking this is the door that's going to open. It has to, so I can heal.
Right.
And in time, healing comes to the very wound in a way that is so much greater and kinder and supportive.
Yes.
Than if you just banged on the door and said, I need to know, tell me.
Right.
There was a mutual aha.
Yes. Divine timing.
Exactly. And that's that place of knowing that you're loved,
mm-hmm.
rather than a demand of
mm-hmm.
love me.
Right. Yeah, I'll never forget the email, "Hi, I'm your cousin Corey."
Wow.
It stunned me. Number one, because I almost named Dane Corey. And then the second message was, "Hey, I'm your cousin Danielle." And I was like, wow. She said, "Yep, you belong to us. Go take a look at my sister, Bobby." And so I went to Bobby's page, and I walked into Todd's bathroom, and I just had my iPhone with Bobby's picture up. And he looked at me and he said, "Oh my God, Dana." I said, "I know." And then I sent it to Elise, and Elise said, "Mom, is that your sister? Did you find your sister?" And I said, "No, this is my cousin." "Well, my God, Mom, she looks like your sister."
Wow. Really?
Yeah. And so it began. But in an unexpected way, in a perfectly timed way. And I had to bushwhack through the damn weeds to get there. Let's just say through the swamp, through the weeds, all the way around the bushes, back up and down that hill how many times for Homblecha Vision Quest, and lo and behold, 23andMe and Ancestry.com.
Yeah.
And there it is.
And there it is. And even to take the time to look at it, to be in the privacy of what you're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sending the pictures out like, "Oh my God, look at this! Look that! Oh my God, look at that! Look at that!" And to have the wound, have the wound feel the imprint of the discovery that there is a cure here.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a dash
mm-hmm.
your whole life.
Mm-hmm. Somebody asked me, so was it hard for you to, rather than to be able to touch your mother and your father, was it hard to go to the cemetery and to see them in a cemetery rather than to be able to hold them or to hug them and to talk to them? And in our humanness it is, but the gift in this lifetime for me, particularly at the cemetery when I was putting a fresh flag on my father's grave, was to be able to see him sitting there in the lawn.
Wow.
and very much sitting there in the lawn. And so it was more than just a human touch of being able to touch him. It was our souls meeting at this determined place where I could be with his soul and without maybe the encumbrances of his human existence, which wasn't always easy. But to be there in the pureness of who he is as a soul was really...
When you first saw him, Dana?
It was brilliant. He was just sitting there wearing a pair of jeans and an old white t-shirt, sitting there very comfortable and very relaxed as I was cleaning up around his headstone and fixing things up. You know, I like to tidy things.
Yes.
And yes. And yes. And then going along and, you know, touching up my uncles who were there as well, their headstones. But to see him sitting there so healthy and happy in the moment. And so there was great ecstasy in that moment of great pain. And to focus on the ecstasy of everything that had to happen behind the scenes and in the physical realm, for people to listen to their intuition, for Corey and Danielle to not just say, well, that's interesting, but to immediately reach out to me. And both of them have said to me, it wasn't an option for them. They felt compelled to reach out. There was something greater going on in that moment. And
I had such a deep burp right there.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God.
It's the beauty. So sometimes in the healing, there's anguish, and we have to search for the beauty in the anguish. But once we're able to locate the beauty in the pain, then that beauty will provide the healing. It's the salve for the pain.
The tears of the relief.
Yes.
Because when the tears come, there's so many, and that's also part of healing. Sometimes healing starts when the tears stop, finally. But most often, healing starts when the tears are allowed.
Yes.
And they're not even tears of you know what or you know why. They're there because all of a sudden there's relief.
Yes. Well, there I was in my hotel room taking a bath, and the phone rings, and it's you.
Yes.
And you said, what are you doing? I said, I'm in the bathtub crying. What are you doing? Oh. Oh, Lordy, Sandra.
Yes.
Yeah.
Time to talk.
Yeah.
And that preciousness is when the wound gets validated.
Yeah.
That preciousness to be able to cry, be witnessed, be soothed, self-soothed, and have the honor of telling the story with the compassion of it's real.
Yeah.
I'm not crazy.
Yes.
It's real, and this has been insane.
Yes.
It's real. The wound is real, and it's really being healed.
Yeah. It's amazing how often we live with other people's insanity as our truth.
Yes.
And when somebody else's insanity becomes our truth, usually beginning in childhood, sometimes later than that, when we come to understand that it's their insanity and it isn't a descriptor of what our soul and what we know to be true about ourselves, that's huge relief, and it's huge healing to know that another person's insanity, whether it's our parent, our lover, our friend, whoever that is, in their insanity, and whatever way we danced with it, and maybe we took some of it with us, to come to the place where we can say, this is your insanity.
Right.
It isn't mine. I've found my sanity.
Exactly.
Is big.
It is. And I think what you're tapping on is so incredibly profound, because we're brought up so many times in a insane situation that we accommodate it at such a deep need that it normalizes.
Yes.
And we forget that it's kind of crazy.
Yeah. That's some crazy crap.
And we adapt. Yeah. And we adapt in ways that we should, and until all of a sudden someone says, that ain't normal.
Yeah.
And we don't know that until we get outside and somebody else has an opinion on that. It's like, I need to walk you outside a bit.
Well, and when we're going through any process of healing, the young one within us will say, but what about that time? And I remember being with my Aunt Dot. I got to meet her while I was there, and she's just an astoundingly beautiful woman with an amazing humor, and talk about a woman who's been through hell and gone and back again, and still maintains this beautiful person that she is. I asked her, I said, Aunt Dot, I need to talk to you about something that happened to me when I was a young girl. And she looked at me and she said, what are you talking about? I said, that's not normal, is it, Aunt Dot? And she said, girl, that ain't normal. There is nothing normal about what you just said. And I thought to myself, geez, it took me 50 years to finally ask a sane person about something I knew even as a kid was insane.
Exactly.
And in her validation of, yes, that is insane, and no, you're not.
Exactly.
For understanding the truth, there's a healing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is astounding when common sense speaks to the trauma of an insanity that creates wound.
Yes.
Because you don't even know you're allowed to think it.
Yes.
I mean, one of the ways that I work is all of a sudden I can flip the story and people go, what?
Mm-hmm.
I've never even thought of that. And it's the common sense to the wound.
Yes.
In the starting of the healing.
Yes.
Rather than, and it's not even, you don't have to make sense of it. It's just common sense. So your aunt gave you the common sense.
Yes.
Of the option of the way you could think.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that's relief.
Yeah. Stepping out of the insanity isn't always easy, whether it's the insanity of addiction or the insanity of melodrama or psychosis or the insanity of the perpetuated wounding, whatever that happens to be. Taking up residence in another person's insanity, either willingly or unwillingly or unconsciously, and all of a sudden one day craving your own sanity leads to a path of healing that is absolutely spectacular.
Absolutely.
In its high highs and its low lows.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that you're not crazy by wanting to change.
Mm-hmm.
You may go crazy a little bit in changing, but you're not crazy
Done that.
when you want to change.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it does take that warp to go, oh my God, I'm about to have a mind bend, because your mind is bending away to a different form of light, mm-hmm. a different attitude, a different voice, a different gesture, mm-hmm. and realizing I work with that a little bit better than this warped place.
Yes.
And you come out of your paralysis.
Yes.
You come out of your disfigurement.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, wounds are a disfiguration of something, and to heal it, you either get it back to looking normal, or you get it back to functioning best it can, and there's always the scar.
Yeah. There's
the honor of having it. And even though emotional wounds, they say emotional wounds are way worse than the physical ones, because nobody gets to see them. You can act normal and never, ever, ever, ever show that you're wounded.
Right.
And those are the wounds that need to be attended to. And gratefully, there's many ways to find ways to do that. Mm-hmm. So.
Okay, so Sand, last words. In your 70 years of being here on Grandmother Earth, terra firma, for anyone who's listening tonight and thinking, oh my God, I've really got to get on this, because I know it's time for me to break away from the insanity, to get whole, to get healthy, and I know it's going to make people unhappy, and there will be those who will compel me to want to go back into the insanity, so that status quo is maintained. What do you say to those people who believe that they're ready to take the first step out of insanity and into healing?
First and foremost, know that you may doubt yourself, and have the faith that your soul is calling you. Your instinct is that there is a place inside you that it's calling you to find a new way and to consider trusting it. Put your foot out, kind of feel the ground, test the waters. Second, know that this is not a mistake, and you're going to worry about your safety. What if I change? Will I be able to stay where I am? The answer is pretty much no, and that safety means there has to be a change. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to destroy your home. It means you change, and therefore the ambiance and the vibration in your home will change. And that's part of the healing, and it's an old remedy. How many times you said, well, if they'll just change, then everything will be better. Well, they don't, and then it doesn't. And the truth is, you need to make the vibration different and send out that vibration for the opportunity to change. The final thing I have to say, all my 71 years, is when you get the itch to start to heal, run! Run to it with open arms. Be brave. Have the courage. And even if there is pain in the healing, it's the pain that you've been stuffing down inside you, driving you crazy, thinking nobody's ever going to understand you. Mm-hmm. And you'd be amazed how sane you are when you start dealing with your wounds.
You know, this evening, my last client for the evening is a retired physician. And so I had a session for he and his wife because he is in the process of dying. And, you know, he was asking me to help him for the next while, do spirit doula work with him to help him prepare for his passing. And the first thing, you know, that we did this evening before the show, I did ceremony here in my home for him, healing ceremony, to release all of those places of insanity. His insanity, his patient's insanity. As an oncologist, his patient's fears of death and of life and all of those things that reside within most physicians, I believe. But to release those so that at the time when it's time for him to transition, whenever that is, he's in the state of grace at this moment, and the grace to prepare for the ultimate healing. So that whatever healing is accomplished between now and the time that he leaves his physical body, he'll be cleared of and clean so that there's less work to do in healing without his physical body, because a lot of these things travel with us. And so, you know, we think about generational healing, but for myself, when we heal our soul, that's a healing that continues on with our soul. And things will crop up at varying times within our lifetime or lifetimes, depending on how you feel about reincarnation, that call us to review it, to call it up, to let it go, to heal from it and carry on and grow. Healing is a perpetual state for a lot of us. It's something that we're always doing. My cousin Donna was saying, you know, then she's always in the state of healing, feeling like that. And that's a good thing.
If you're growing, you're healing the very bone, flesh, tissue, and blood that has to go through transition and change and expand.
Yes.
Growing pains. It's not a saying, it's a reality.
Yes. And healing provides a state of grace with spirit. As you know, I was talking to my client this evening and his wife. I said, you're in a state of grace in this moment. And the question is, what are you going to do in this state of grace with your healing before the ultimate healing? And he looked at me and he said, by God, Denise, I never thought of it that way before.
Exactly.
One way to think about the grace that comes with healing and the grace that is provided for our healing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the ultimate healing, the transition of one body into that form of spirit.
Yeah. Yes.
God bless your work.
And yours.
Okay, my love.
Okay, my love.
To everybody, thank you for listening. I'm Sandra Herrick. You can find me at sandraherrick.com. And I love being with Dana. I think we need to do more shows. That's all I got to say about that.
Thank you all for joining us tonight. And until next time, get out there and shine and do your work and know that you're not doing it in a vacuum.
At all.
Blessings be, everybody.
Bye.